This question comes from Matt Plymel. He asked, who can the Chiefs pick up in free agency to help fill the depth chart on the defensive ends? Thank you, Matt, for your question. This is an interesting question because I think that we all have similar stances, that we don't necessarily think that there is a good answer outside of the team. We think the best answer is within, but there are obviously some good options outside. Connor, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I think there's a good option or a few. I think Cameron Wake's like number one. He's played defensive end. He's one of the few 4-3 guys that are available that we at least know. He'd be good for depth. I think the Chiefs still need rotational players. They are thin as far as rotational goes, but I think the point that we're all gonna go off into fantasizing land, which hasn't even been a fantasy recently because it's been happening, is just move Chris Jones out there.
Yep.
I think it's smart. I think it gives the Chiefs their 4 best defensive linemen on the field. The main starter at defensive end should be Jones, and it should be moving him inside on third down and long is fine. Getting your more pass rushers out there is always better. But on like first and second down, I think Jones should probably be on the outside, and then you can put in Wharton and Noddy in the middle. I think that's their best lineup, really, on defensive line. That's their best lineup, even if they're healthy too. I think they're just being forced to do this because who else is going to play defensive end?
Jordan?
Yeah, no, I'm with you completely, Connor. I think Jones moving to DN is probably the most fun thing and probably the most logical thing to do. Will it happen full time? Probably not, just because I guess they know way better than we do, but it would be cool. And I think that especially on first and second down, having Jones there would be nice. I made a list of 4 guys and Cameron Wake was number 1. It kind of reminded me of the Terrell Suggs situation last year, where it's an older guy who still has a bit left in the tank, wants to prove that he can still play, wants a championship, something like that. Terrell Suggs was number 2. I read an article on him a few days ago. He talked about like spending more time with his family and like getting healthy and stuff. And I don't believe he's officially retired, but I kind of read that as he's not banking on coming back. So who knows what happens there. And then Vic Beasley just got cut by the Titans after having like no impact all season, but he's still only 28 years old. So maybe bring him in and see if he has any juice. And then a guy that I like, who I'm kind of surprised he hasn't been signed yet, Clay Matthews. He had 8 sacks, 3 passes defense, 57 tackles last year. Like, health has always been an issue for him, but he proved he has some left in the tank. I think he's only 34 or 35. He'd be a guy that I think would be kind of interesting to not only rush the passer, but also like set the edge.
Who did Matthews play for last season?
He was with the Rams.
The Rams.
That's right. Yeah. No, yeah. I like that. I didn't even think about Clay Matthews. I had Vic Beasley down, but I couldn't remember if he played outside linebacker or if he was a D end. I don't know what defense Tennessee runs, but
he's more. I think he's more of a defensive end.
Yeah. Okay. I couldn't remember off the top of my head. So, but I do think that moving Chris Jones out there, and hey, I mean, Connor, I think we talked about this on our podcast on Tuesday. Frank Clark talked about it. He said, hey, Chris is going to get out there, but the thing is that we both like the right side. So we got to decide who wants the right, who wants the left. Frank Clark wants Chris Jones out there is what it sounds like. He's like, hey, we need to get more sacks. I think the Chiefs are very near the top in terms of pressures, but when it comes to sacks, they're near the bottom. So they're not converting pressures into sacks, which is somewhat frustrating because it seems like the secondary has been playing very well. So you want to see a little bit more sacks, a little bit more reward to those guys who are getting all those pressures. But I do think that the Chris Jones on the edge is very enticing. And Connor and I, and Jordan, we have too. All 3 of us have talked about this pretty much all year. So to see
we've been talking
about fruition.
We've been talking about Willie Gay also playing way more too, and that's not been happening. So maybe we just can't will things into happening on this podcast, sadly.
Well, I mean, it's looking like it might happen though. With not Willie Gay, sadly, but the Chris Jones. That looks like that's more and more a possibility. And you have to think about the COVID hurdles they have to go through to bring some guys in. It takes 5 days, I believe, to get a guy just to come into the facility. So that could really slow things down. Another guy I really like free agent wise is Steven Wisniewski. Not necessarily he doesn't have to step in. I know he's coming off the IR, but he doesn't have to step in just for more depth on the offensive side of the ball.
I didn't know he could play defensive end. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that'd be pretty dope if he could kind of rush the passer a little bit too.
That's a big boy. Oh man,
he is a big boy.
I did get off the track there because I started thinking about free agents, and he's a free agent. So
I would also like to bring in Wisniewski as well. I think that's
Yes.
probably a smart. That's actually more of a want for me than a defensive end. So
Yep.
mhm.
especially because he knows the system at least a little bit. So